What if I told you that every moment of suffering, every heartbreak, every challenge you've faced was part of an initiation? Not a punishment, not a coincidence, but a secret process designed to awaken something ancient and powerful within you. For thousands of years, mystery schools around the world, from the temples of Egypt to the mountains of Tibet, guarded this one truth. Spiritual awakening is not given, it is earned. And it is earned through initiation. Initiation was not simply a ritual, it was a death and rebirth of consciousness. It tested every fiber of a seeker's being, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, until the illusions of the ego dissolved and the truth of the soul emerged. But here's the secret most people never hear. Ancient initiations were never about joining a cult, learning hidden handshakes, or gaining secret knowledge. It was about transforming human consciousness through direct experience. Imagine stepping into a dark temple, your eyes blindfolded, guided only by the voice of a priest who speaks in riddles. You hear the sound of dripping water, the hiss of incense, the echo of your own heartbeat. You are told, the gods dwell within you. But first, you must die to find them. To the uninitiated, these rituals might look theatrical, even strange. But to those who understood, they symbolized the journey of the soul, the descent into darkness, the confrontation with one's shadow, and the eventual ascent into divine light. And here's where it becomes truly fascinating. This process wasn't limited to temples or secret societies. It exists all around us, hidden in myths, reflected in religion, encoded in dreams, and even playing out in our own lives. When you lose everything and find meaning again, when you face your greatest fear and come out stronger, when you finally understand that pain was never the enemy, you have, in essence, undergone initiation. In this video, we'll uncover what ancient initiations truly were, why they were hidden, and most importantly, how their principles still shape your spiritual evolution today. We'll explore the mystery traditions of Egypt, Greece, and the East, the symbolism behind the trials of the soul, and the reason every true seeker must walk the same timeless path, the path of transformation through ordeal. By the end, you may realize that initiation is not something that happens once in a temple. It is something happening right now, in your very life. Because the greatest mystery of all is that the sacred temple was never outside you. It has always been within. To understand the secret behind ancient initiations, we must step back, far back, into the time when temples were not merely places of worship, but living laboratories of the soul. In ancient Egypt, initiation was a sacred science. The Great Pyramid itself was not built merely as a tomb, but as a temple of transformation. Within its chambers, initiates were said to undergo the rite of the living death, a symbolic passage through death into higher consciousness. Lying within the sarcophagus of the king's chamber, the candidate would be left alone in absolute darkness. For 3 days and nights, they would face their own mind, every fear, every memory, every attachment. When they emerged, they were no longer the same. They had died to the illusion of separation and awakened to the truth of the One. The Egyptians called this process parames, meaning to be born again. The Greeks later adopted this idea and called it initiation, from the Latin initium, meaning a beginning. It was not an end, but the sacred threshold to a new life. In the temples of Eleusis, Greece, initiates participated in the Eleusinian mysteries, secret rites dedicated to Demeter and Persephone. These mysteries reenacted the descent of Persephone into the underworld and her return to the world of light, a cosmic metaphor for the soul's own journey into ignorance and back into divine remembrance. The philosopher Plato, who was himself initiated, wrote that the mysteries purify those who have experienced them, and they become more perfect, being delivered from the bonds of generation. Similarly, in the East, the yogic and tantric traditions developed their own systems of initiation, known as diksha. Here, the guru was not merely a teacher, but a living embodiment of truth, a guide who used energy, mantra, and consciousness itself to ignite the divine flame within the student. What unites all these traditions is one simple, profound idea. Truth cannot be taught, it must be experienced. The words, the symbols, the rituals, they were only keys. The real initiation occurred when consciousness itself crossed a threshold, when a seeker's perception shifted from the outer world of forms to the inner world of essence. The ancient mystery schools were therefore not secret because they wished to exclude others, but because the truth they guarded could not be spoken, only realized. As the Hermetic text Corpus Hermeticum says, the teaching is not for all men, but for those whom the divine wills. Those who are ready will hear, and in hearing, awaken. Initiation was thus both a rite and a revelation, a deliberate act to shatter illusion and awaken divine memory. But here's where most modern interpretations fall short. The ancients knew that initiation was not a single event. It was a lifelong process, a sequence of tests, inner deaths, and spiritual rebirths. Each trial revealed a deeper layer of truth, and each truth required a greater surrender of the self. This idea spread across cultures, in the Druid sacred groves, in the desert caves of the Essenes, in the hidden lodges of the alchemists, and in the monasteries of the East. The outer forms changed, but the inner purpose remained the same: to awaken the divine spark sleeping within the human being. And so, when modern seekers hear of ancient initiations, they often imagine ceremonies shrouded in secrecy, guarded by priests and mystics. But the true initiations, the ones that mattered, took place not in temples, but in consciousness itself. They were not about gaining secret knowledge. They were about becoming that knowledge. Initiation, in its truest sense, is the art of transformation through experience. It is the sacred bridge between the human and the divine, a process through which consciousness is refined, purified, and reborn into higher awareness. But how does this process actually work? What happens to the soul during initiation? The ancients described it as passing through the veil. In temples, this veil was symbolized by a literal curtain that separated the outer sanctum from the inner chamber, the profane from the sacred. To pass through that veil was not just a physical act, it represented the soul's journey inward, beyond appearances, into the heart of truth.
Let's take the classic triad of initiation: purification, illumination, and union. 1. Purification, the death of the false self. The first stage was a symbolic death. The initiate would be stripped of their old identity, name, clothing, possessions. They were made to face their fears, doubts, and inner shadows. This stage was not meant to humiliate, but to humble, to dissolve the layers of illusion that bind a soul to its lower nature. It is here that many falter, because purification demands honesty, vulnerability, and surrender. In modern terms, purification is the process of inner confrontation. It happens when we face our addictions, our anger, our wounds, and instead of running, we listen. Every dark emotion is an uninitiated aspect of our own consciousness, waiting to be brought into light. As the alchemists said, solve e coagula, dissolve what is false so that what is true may unite. 2. Illumination, the awakening of the inner light. Once purified, the initiate entered the phase of illumination. Here, consciousness expanded beyond the personal self. The seeker began to perceive the unity of all things, to sense the divine intelligence pulsing through every atom of existence. In this state, the outer world was no longer seen as a collection of objects, but as a living field of energy and meaning. Symbols, dreams, and coincidences began to communicate directly with the soul. This stage was often accompanied by visions, insights, or mystical experiences. Yet the teachers of old warned that illumination is not the end. It is only a glimpse, the dawn before the full sunrise. The danger here was spiritual pride, the belief that enlightenment had been achieved, when in truth the journey had just deepened. 3. Union, the dissolution of the boundary. The final stage was the most mysterious. Union, the merging of the finite with the infinite. In Egyptian rites, it was symbolized by Osiris being resurrected after being dismembered. In the Vedic tradition, by the yogi merging with Brahman. In Christian mysticism, by the soul's marriage to the divine. At this point, there is no longer a seeker and the sought, no longer an initiate and initiation. There is only being. This was the secret that all temples guarded, not a doctrine, but a state of consciousness beyond description. Those who reached it returned transformed. They spoke differently, moved differently, radiated something ineffable, a peace that was not of this world. But here lies the deeper secret, one that bridges ancient times and our modern lives. Initiation never ended with the temple. It continues today, disguised as ordinary experiences. Heartbreak, loss, failure, love, rebirth. Each moment of crisis is a hidden rite, each challenge a symbolic threshold. The ancients would say, when life brings you to your knees, the initiation has begun. Every true initiation, whether ancient or modern, follows a universal pattern. This pattern is often called the hero's journey, but in esoteric terms, it is the soul's descent and return. When the ancients designed their initiatory systems, they were mirroring the inner architecture of the cosmos. They believed that every human being carried within them a fragment of the divine, a spark that had descended into matter and forgotten its origin. Initiation was the sacred process of remembering that origin. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the initiate's journey through the underworld was not a literal post-mortem story. It was an instruction manual for consciousness. Each deity, each trial, each gate symbolized an aspect of the soul's inner purification. When the heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the principle of truth, it represented the final test. Could the initiate
stand before the divine light without the burden of illusion. Similarly, in the Eleusinian mysteries, the descent of Persephone symbolized the soul's fall into material existence, and her return each spring represented reawakening, the eternal cycle of death, transformation, and renewal. These myths were not mere stories, they were maps of initiation. Even in the Christian narrative, this same archetype reappears. The baptism by water, the 40 days in the desert, the crucifixion and the resurrection, each stage mirrors the initiatory pattern. Christ himself was the initiate and the initiator, guiding others through the mystery of spiritual death and rebirth. This same thread runs through shamanic traditions, where the future healer often falls gravely ill or faces symbolic death before receiving their power. The ordeal itself, pain, isolation, dismemberment, is what opens them to the spiritual realms. Only by dying to their old self can they perceive the world of spirit. Here lies the hidden wisdom. Initiation is not something given by a teacher. It is catalyzed by experience, but completed by consciousness. The ancients knew that true transformation cannot happen in comfort. The soul awakens only when shaken, broken, and reforged by the fire of awareness. That is why the ancients often described the path of initiation as the narrow gate, or the razor's edge. It is not meant for those who seek comfort or control. It is meant for those who seek truth at any cost. And yet, paradoxically, initiation is not about adding anything new to the self. It is about removing everything false. The initiate does not become divine. They realize they always were. The entire process is an unveiling, layer by layer, illusion by illusion, until nothing remains but pure awareness. When ancient priests whispered, "Know thyself," they were not speaking of personality or biography. They were invoking the deepest mystery, that the seeker, the path, and the divine goal are one and the same. So how can we live the wisdom of initiation today, in a world without temples, priests, or sacred chambers carved from stone? The answer is both simple and profound. Life itself has become the temple. Every joy, every heartbreak, every loss, every triumph, all are modern echoes of the ancient rites. You are being initiated, whether you realize it or not. The question is whether you will move through those experiences unconsciously or awaken within them.
Below are ways to consciously engage the initiatory process. Practices to help you turn daily challenges into sacred thresholds. 1. Recognize the threshold. In every ancient mystery school, the initiate began by stepping across the threshold, leaving behind the familiar and entering the unknown. Today, these thresholds appear as moments of uncertainty. When you lose direction, face illness, or feel life falling apart. Instead of resisting, pause and whisper inwardly, "This is initiation." Naming it reclaims your power. It transforms chaos into ceremony. It reminds you that even darkness has divine purpose. When everything in you wants to escape discomfort, remember the ancient words carved above the Temple of Delphi. Know thyself. Self-knowledge begins not in comfort, but in confrontation with fear, doubt, and illusion. 2. Embrace the descent. Initiation always involves a descent into shadow, grief, and silence. The modern seeker often tries to bypass this stage through constant distraction or false positivity. But in ancient temples, the descent was sacred. It was the womb of transformation. When pain arises, don't rush to escape it. Sit with it. Ask, what is this emotion trying to teach me? You will find that every pain carries wisdom. Every shadow hides a fragment of light. Meditation, journaling, and solitude are modern forms of descending into the underworld. They allow the unconscious to speak and the deeper self to emerge. 3. Practice inner ritual. The outer rites of the ancients, fasting, silence, sacred movement, breathing, were designed to alter consciousness. You can create your own inner rituals with the same intention. Each morning, light a candle not as decoration, but as invocation. Watch its flame and say inwardly, "May the light within me awaken." When you drink water, do it mindfully, realizing that it cleanses not only the body, but the mind. When you breathe deeply, imagine drawing in divine energy and exhaling illusion. Through small but intentional acts, daily life becomes sacred space. The mundane transforms into mystery. 4. Observe the trials. Every initiation includes tests, not imposed by gods, but generated by consciousness itself. Notice how life keeps bringing you the same lessons until you respond differently. The colleague who tests your patience, the partner who mirrors your insecurities, the recurring obstacles, these are not random. They are the guardians of the threshold spoken of in esoteric lore. Your reaction determines whether you pass or repeat the lesson. When you choose awareness over impulse, compassion over judgment, you advance in the silent temple of your soul. 5. Integrate and emerge. The purpose of initiation was never escape from the world, but transformation within it. After each inner revelation, ground yourself. Express wisdom through action. Live it in how you speak, work, and love. Remember, illumination that does not serve others becomes stagnation. The true initiate returns from the inner world carrying light for all beings. To walk the initiatory path today does not require ancient symbols or secret societies. It requires awareness, courage, and sincerity. Every time you choose presence over distraction, truth over comfort, humility over pride, you are reenacting the mysteries of old. You are stepping into the same current that moved through the pyramids, the temples, and the caves of the saints. The forms have changed, but the essence remains eternal. Across the ages, from the shadowed halls of Egypt to the hidden monasteries of the East, initiation has always pointed to one truth: you are far more than you appear to be. The ancient rites were never about belonging to an elite group or learning secret doctrines. They were about awakening the God within the human, the eternal within the temporary. Every veil lifted, every illusion burned away, was a step closer to remembering the soul's divine origin. Today, the symbols remain, though often unrecognized. The darkness before dawn, the pain before healing, the loss that becomes liberation. These are not random events. They are sacred initiations in disguise. The outer temples may have crumbled, but the inner sanctum, the temple of your consciousness, remains unshaken. When you feel lost, when life strips away everything you thought you were, remember this: the ancient initiates called that moment the sacred night. It is the moment just before illumination, the silence before revelation. In that silence, something eternal awakens. Something that cannot die, cannot be broken, cannot be diminished. That is the true initiation. Not a ceremony, but an unfolding awareness. Not a ritual, but a remembrance. And so the next time life tests you, The next time you face a storm you cannot control, whisper inwardly, "This is my initiation. I am not being destroyed, I am being transformed." Because the real temple was never made of stone or built by hands. It lives within your heart, waiting for you to enter. And when you do, when you cross that inner threshold, you will discover what all true initiates eventually find: that the light you sought was always within you, that the teacher you searched for has always been your own soul, and that every trial was never meant to punish you. It was meant to set you free.